I'm the type of filmmaker that loves to organize everything. I plan my shoots very, very thoroughly, shot lists, schedules, interview questions. Everything is very tightly controlled. But for my last project, I threw all of that out the window and went the complete other end of the spectrum and planned almost next to nothing. And it went extremely well. And I want to talk to you guys about why I did that, what happened on the shoot, and what I learned from letting go of all the control that I thought I needed on a set. Coming from narrative commercials and those sort of productions, planning and structure becomes very, very essential. You'll get the most for the time that you're on set, the more organized you are. I also think having that rigorous structure and organization probably gave me a lot of confidence. I had the answers to every question because when you're at the top in charge like that, I feel it's important to be able to give people answers and provide that sense of direction. So I thrived on that. I thrived on that organization and on the planning and on the scheduling. And it seemed to work well for a lot of things, but it probably took a bit of the enjoyment out of some aspects of filmmaking. Over time, I probably realized that particularly in the documentary world, that amount of structure and organization not only is impossible and plausible in most circumstances, but also probably detracts from being in the moment and being present. But I think part of growing is definitely pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and trying things that are scary and that are new to you. And so I knew I wanted to do a project in a way that I hadn't done ever, actually. I knew I wanted to do it about this sculptor that I knew called Rufus Martin, an unbelievable sculptor and a fascinating man in general. He told me that the technical skills of sculpting don't hugely matter in his work to a certain degree. Once you get past being able to technically replicate someone's face and body, the actual artistry comes from going a level deeper and being present with the person and being able to sort of interpret their spirit and essence in the sculpture. And I thought that was really interesting because I thought that sort of could apply directly to filmmaking, where the technical aspects, again, once you understand how to shoot something, how to edit it, how to make something mechanically work correctly, really where the artistry comes in is that deeper level. So that initial pre-interview that I had with him inspired me to approach this project in the same way that he does, where he's confident in his technical skills, but he allows himself to be fully present in the moment of discovering what the sculpture is going to be with the person in front of him. So I decided to do exactly the same thing and go in there without a shot list, without interview questions, without any real preparation at all other than a pre-interview and a very rough idea of what I'd like to discuss with him in terms of some larger theme to do with his artistic process. But that was it. And that was terrifying. But as we're about to find out, it went extremely well. Certain things happened on the shoot that just wouldn't have happened if I'd gone in there with a very rigorous structured plan. And I feel the project overall was way stronger because of it. So I turned up and just had to fully rely on my filmmaking instincts, which I'm confident in. You know, I've been making films a while and I'm confident in the technical aspects of my craft. And I've done a lot of interviews, so I'm comfortable just talking with someone and kind of figuring out in my head the way that conversation might be edited together. So the technical skills are there, but I just wanted to rely instinctively on what I was feeling with him in the moment and in the time I was spending with him, more so than I ever had done. And that led to certain things being asked in the interview or certain things we spoke about that I just wouldn't have talked about had I gone in with more of a precise plan of where I wanted to take the interview or where I wanted things to go. And I think his answers were more interesting because of it. And the same thing with how I ended up shooting it and the certain shots that I got and where I decided to stand and put the camera. All of that just sort of flowed naturally and spontaneously in the moment with him and really allowed me to be far more present. I think there's moments in the final film that are a much more true representation of his character and his persona that I was able to capture and find because I was just present with him. Weirdly, that's something that I don't think I'd found too often with other films I've done so far. So I know when I say being present, people might go like, what does that actually mean? What I mean by that is if you're talking to someone, really listen, like actually listen and respond properly with what you're thinking and have a conversation. Don't just think that you're extracting something from them. Be there with them in that space, talking to them as a human being. And then when you're shooting something, actually look at what is going on in front of you and think, how do you tell the story better with what you're shooting? How can you try and capture details that you might be missing because you're focusing on a frame? Look at the details of hands, of like, what is the person actually doing? Like, where's the craft in what they're doing? Or, details of the place that they're in. What does their environment say about them? Look at that interesting book on a shelf that they've had, or be looking at their face and really concentrating on their concentration and their expressions. Again, not just kind of thinking about the beauty of the image, but really thinking, what are they thinking and feeling right now? And can I try and get that in the camera somehow? And then on a kind of wider scale, keeping yourself open to ideas and scenes or scenarios that you could do that feel like they fit the person or the world because of what you are experiencing in that moment. So, for example, there's this amazing shot that we've got at the start of the film of Rufus in front of a big backdrop. That idea of doing that kind of grandiose shot of him in front of that only came from being there with him and seeing the tapestry. It's all those little things and little details, as well as the kind of macro, how's the film going to ebb and flow and how that comes together, and thinking of how certain shots and edits might fit together in a way that you wouldn't have done if you were just so rigid in your plan to begin with. I'm not saying that this approach will work for every shoot and every situation, by the way. This was a really good situation where there was no external pressure. This was just someone I knew and I was friends with. There weren't high stakes surrounding the shoot. So there was the ability to be more flexible and free during the time I had with him. But that won't always be the case. But I think what it's prompted me to do going forward is to just try and allow myself to have more confidence in my filmmaking abilities, lean into them and fall back on them when things don't necessarily go to plan or when things aren't 100% planned. And it's a really interesting one because it's definitely flipped my perception a little bit of what I think and thought a good director or leader is or was. If anyone had any questions, they were the one saying, do this, do that. This is how we do it. They were the source of clarity and direction amongst the chaos. And I still think some of that is true. When things are going badly or you're in a storm, you do need the person to be making decisions to keep moving the ship forward. But I also think that creativity is non-linear and there isn't a right or wrong process to find the best creative solution to something or creative way of doing something. And I think therefore that if you are trying to also be a good creative leader, maybe it's also about holding more space to have a bit more discovery together with your team or with yourself even, so that you can find those moments that you weren't planning for. And sometimes those moments can be the best moments.